Inheritance tax in the UK is 40%. So if you have an estate over £325,000, then you are likely going to be paying a lot of money to HMRC. So for example, if you have an estate of over £2 million, then you will be paying at least £670,000 over to HMRC in inheritance tax. That seems like a lot of money, and after a lifetime of saving up all of that money, it seems a bit of a waste to just hand that over to HMRC. But with 4 clever moves that I'll be covering in this video, I'll show you how you can mitigate a lot, if not all, of that tax burden. And some of these moves even I didn't know about until very recently. And at the end of the video, I will actually share a worked example to bring the tax saving to life. For those of you who are new to this channel, Islamic Finance Guru, or IFG for short, is a halal investment and personal finance platform. We compare, analyze and review investments and financial products from the Islamic finance world. Our mission is to help Muslims across the world get wealthier and put their money to work. If that sounds like it's up your street, then please do like this video and subscribe to our channel and follow us on our journey. And please feel free to share this video and any other of our videos with your friends and family as well. And if you'd like to chat with me and thousands of like-minded others, then we have a really active Telegram community, and the link for that is below, so please do join us in the conversation over there. For Muslims, to get a trust-based Islamic will is a key way for them to be able to save tax and also make sure that their inheritance is distributed in a Sharia-compliant Islamic way. You see, there are 3 key ways that you can use a will to try and reduce inheritance tax. The first is that if you give anything to your spouse, then that will be tax-free. The second is you've got the 325,000 zero inheritance tax allowance for every single person. And the third is the additional residential nil rate band that is completely tax-free, which is £175,000, where you are inheriting your residential property, your family home, to your children and a few others. The government actually allows you to roll up the nil rate band, the additional nil rate band, and even your spouse's nil rate band and additional nil rate band if they haven't used it when they first died, so that in total you end up with something like £1 million that could be completely tax-free. But if your estate is more than that, it's more than £1 million, then you will need to take a few other steps to mitigate against that. Let's look at those as well. The other really interesting strategy is that anything you gift during your lifetime, and as long as you live for 7 years after that, is completely tax-free. It's completely outside of your estate. But of course, you don't necessarily want to give everything away in your lifetime. I appreciate that. There are actually still some other strategies that will be useful for you that don't require gifting as well. Let's have a look at those now as well. The other really interesting strategy that you can use is invest in business property relief type of investments. What this means is that if you are investing in unlisted or private companies and you've got shares in those companies and they qualify for business property relief, then that completely falls outside of inheritance tax. So any of that money that you have in those companies is going to be free of inheritance tax. That is a pretty cool strategy to use. However, there is one warning point here. The companies that you're investing in, when they're unlisted or private, smaller companies, then they are more higher risk as well. So there is that element of the puzzle that you need to think about. The way that you can invest in business property relief eligible investments is roughly twofold. First, you can invest in AIM listed stocks and shares that are actually freely tradable, but because they are quite small stocks and they are emerging small cap stocks, the government is very keen to incentivize people to invest in them. So that's why you don't attract inheritance tax when you hold these stocks. The really easy way to make sure that you are picking the right stocks within the AIM index that are eligible for this is to invest in inheritance tax funds that specifically specialize in picking these kind of stocks. So if you invest £1,000 into a fund like that, then you know that £1,000 is now completely tax-free. The other really interesting way that you can get access to business property relief type of investments is invest in SEIS and EIS venture capital investments. So this is the kind of stuff that we do at ifg.vc, where we invest in early stage startups, and you can look online and you'll find lots of other EIS funds available. But if you're a Muslim, then of course make sure that they are Sharia compliant, and unfortunately I don't think the majority of them are. Inshallah, we do plan to come out with our own EIS fund over the course of this year, so do watch out for that as well. The other interesting strategy that you can use to mitigate inheritance tax in the UK is just move abroad, right? That means that you actually have to move abroad though. It's not good enough just to put your assets abroad, because inheritance tax can still claw those back. You actually have to go and decide you're going to live in, I don't know, Guyana or Jamaica or Pakistan or whatever it is, and then your assets are going to be determined by the jurisdiction of your country. The UK assets that you still retain at the time of your death, they still attract inheritance tax. So what you would have to do is you'd have to slowly get rid of the UK assets, liquidate them, and move them over to a better tax-saving jurisdictions where you can retire and you don't have that inheritance tax. So that's the other way of going about it. But it is a fairly big commitment to decide to retire in some other country entirely. So do this obviously with a bit of caution. So let's now take a really practical example. Masood has an estate of £5 million. He's done well in his life. If he is not careful, then when he dies, he could potentially have inheritance tax due of £1.87 million. Now, the first step that Masood takes is he gets himself a trust-based Islamic will. He has a wife, he has a residential property, and so he has made sure that around £1 million of his assets are now completely tax-free. That does still leave, though, £4 million that is still potentially taxable. The next thing that Masood does is he knows that he's going to give away a big chunk of his wealth to his children anyway, and he's now fairly well set. He lives with one of his kids. So what he decides is to give £2 million of his estate to his children immediately. He distributes that out to various different children and family members. That is now outside of his estate as long as he lives for 7 years after this. So the earlier he does this, the better, because you've got more chance of surviving for 7 years after that. Final £2 million, Masood is quite relaxed with, because he already has an income with that £1 million, remember at the start, that is completely tax-free. And he doesn't necessarily need to worry about his home or mortgages because he has a residential home, everything's paid off, and he's quite relaxed in that sense. So what he does is he goes for quite an aggressive approach with this £2 million, and he puts about half of it into an AIM index fund. And he makes sure that that fund is eligible for business property relief. So that means that that £1 million is now completely safe from inheritance tax. Then the other £1 million, he allocates that to ifg.vc and the angel syndicate that we have, and invest in those companies, and only in the EIS, SEIS eligible companies. And then eventually in the next few months, as we set up an EIS fund, he just puts all of that money into there. And that has now meant that that final £1 million is also completely tax-free if Masood was to pass away. Now, the interesting thing here is that Masood has taken an estate of 5 million, potentially paying £1.87 million in tax, to zero tax. And the other really interesting thing here is that, you know, that £2 million that Masood has actually invested in the AIM index or in venture capital via ifg.vc, well, over the next few decades, that could multiply quite significantly, because it is a high risk, high reward, high growth kind of investment. And over time, these kind of investments, they have the potential to do really quite well over a long period. And of course, there is the risk that they could do not so well as well. But the point I'm making is that not only has Masood saved that £2 million from tax, he could have made that £2 million become something like £6 million or even more over the next few decades. And all of that will still remain tax-free. Clever, isn't it? So there you have it, folks. There are 4 quite simple strategies that you can use to save a lot of inheritance tax. And I want to make 2 points here. The first is, of course, this is a very short video and there's a lot of nuance behind each of these strategies. And so make sure that when you do apply these strategies, you do read the articles and do your research around this, because there are some criteria that you need to make sure that you meet in order that these strategies actually work for you. The second is that, of course, paying tax is, generally speaking, something that we encourage, but there are legal, completely permissible from an Islamic perspective and a UK law perspective strategies that you can use to mitigate this tax. And if you actually think about it, what you're doing here is not a bad thing. What you're doing here is you're making sure that you use a will, that you are making sure that there aren't any disputes, you are gifting away your money, there isn't anything wrong about that. And finally, you are using a lot of your money to put it into those growth investments and smaller businesses that make this country and its economy succeed over the next few generations. So this is why the government has actually given these allowances in the first place, so that it encourages people to take those investments and do those things in the first place. So you shouldn't feel bad in any way about making these tax saving decisions, because these are actually things that the government wants you to do, because it encourages behavior that makes a UK economy grow in the long run. If you would like an Islamic trust-based will, then check out the link below for IFG wills. We do trust-based Islamic wills as well. And if you'd like to find out more about VC investing and SEIS, EIS investing, then please do check out the link to ifg.vc below. And also, join the Telegram communities, where we have a whole range of very experienced people who are already investing in these things and tax planning away, and they can share their tips with you as well. Finally, if you'd like me to make more of these more technical kind of videos, then please do let me know in the comments below if you find it useful, and I'll factor that in going forward, inshallah, in our future videos as well. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.